So, remember this guy? You know, big tree man who runs a cult and murders people both for fun and for harming the forest? Yeah, that guy. You've probably seen him in my past videos on TikTok or YouTube. Well, this is actually my Regretevator OC, Ivory. And I decided to make this video with him because I wanted to take the opportunity to fully introduce him as a character and also go into detail about his backstory, his in-game lore, his cult, etc, etc. Quick disclaimer, I am going to be talking about a lot of things revolving around cults, abuse, violence, and murder, so please be aware of that when watching this video. Also, any resemblance between Ivory and anyone in real life is purely a coincidence and not at all related to each other whatsoever. So how Ivory first came to life is that a group of random teenagers were fooling around in the woods and out of nowhere decided to perform a ritual on a random oak tree they found, for no other reason other than that they wanted to see what would happen. So they did that, and ended up summoning a 3,000-year-old demon from hell who was then bound to that oak tree and used it as its vessel. From that point onward, Ivory just kind of made himself at home in that forest and slowly learned to use his surroundings to his advantage, all while developing an appreciation for nature in all its glory, and also a distaste for people who harmed it for their own selfish benefit. With this newfound vessel, Ivory also managed to develop the ability to control nature and manipulate it to his will, as well as communicate with animals and make them follow his command. I should also mention that Ivory is a vegetarian, though he does need his source of protein every once in a while. The way he gets his source of protein is by eating live hearts. I'm not joking, he'll eat the hearts of his cult's sacrificial animals, lambs, cows, chickens, etc, etc. But on occasion, he'll help himself to the heart of a human because they're tastier, in his opinion. So Ivory is the leader of a doomsday murder cult that revolves around Ivory as their god/prophet. Think of it like Mister's cult, but with a personal twist. Anyways, the cult is called the Verdant Ascendancy, and they pretty much praise nature like it's the most precious thing on Earth and preach Mother Nature, whom Ivory claims to be able to communicate with. They also adopt and incorporate Christianity into most of their teachings, but also actively engage in acts such as honor killings, torture, rituals, murder, sacrifices, etc. Ivory also has a very brutal way of making sure his followers stay in line, and will often use physical violence and the fear of being damned to hell for eternity, and becoming maggot food for the forest floor if they double-cross him. Luckily for Ivory, all of his followers are too obsessed with him to care and practically worship the ground he walks on. The cult and Ivory also have a massive disdain for those who harm nature for their own benefit, and they kill anyone who comes to their forest and tries to destroy it. The cult has killed about 400 people this way, most of them being from the deforestation industry. The Verdant Ascendancy cult first came to light when Ivory was just minding his own business in the forest one day, and a human, who is now Ivory's right-hand man, comes up to him and tells him that they want to follow his lead as they saw him as some sort of godlike figure who will save the world. Ivory wasn't sold on the idea at first, but then he realized that he could have more power if he was to accept this human, so he decided to take them under his wing with the intention of just casting them aside once he got what he wanted. But that human started telling other people about Ivory and how if they join his lead, then Ivory will, quote-unquote, save them all. This led to Ivory getting drunk on his newfound power and control, and starting to accept more and more humans into his group. Time went by, and Ivory's followers slowly grew in numbers, and to this day, Ivory's newfound cult sits at about 505 followers who are all willing to serve his every whim and desire. Okay, so I'm not going to sugarcoat this at all. 99% of the NPCs are either scared of Ivory or just straight up hate his guts. Split's scared of him, Pilby's scared of him, Bive is scared of him, Poop is scared of him, Pest hates him, Stat hates him, Narpy is scared and jealous of him, Mr. despises him and avoids him like the Black Plague. You get the idea. Meanwhile, Ivory straight up hates everyone else and sees them as beneath him. He also takes great joy in preying on their insecurities and making them feel small. He also does this so that they know their place in life and that they'll always be to what he refers to as weeds in the garden, who only exist to get in his way and to be ripped up from their roots by his hand. Ivory is also trying to find ways to potentially make Bive or Pilby join his cult, mostly because he sees them as good enough candidates for him to manipulate and mold to his liking. Bive because her anxiety makes her unstable, and Pilby because Ivory knows he can use their mother as a weapon against them. Though out of all the NPCs, there is a 0.1% of them that Ivory still doesn't really like but still tolerates. Those NPCs being Mac, Walter, Folly, and Dr. Retro. Ivory tolerates Folly because, well, yeah. In more detail, Ivory used to despise Folly with a passion, whilst Folly just did not take him seriously whatsoever and actually thought he was amusing. After several failed attempts to get Folly to be afraid of him, and subsequently learning that they had a lot more in common than he'd prefer to admit, Ivory slowly began to develop feelings for Folly the more he learned about her and her personality. However, Ivory downright refuses to let it be known that he's in love because part of his cult's beliefs is that lust is something unforgivable and intercourse before marriage is a heinous sin that could make you the next sacrificial lamb in the cult's next ritual if you were caught. Ivory doesn't tell anyone about his crush on Folly because he fears it would make him weak in the eyes of his followers and that they would lose faith in him. Instead, he just resorts to being passive-aggressive towards Folly and will subtly flirt with her on occasion. Meanwhile, Folly just doesn't even realize that Ivory is in love with her and just thinks his behavior towards her is funny. Oh yeah, did I mention that Folly can't see inside Ivory's head because he doesn't let her, and even if Folly did make it inside Ivory's head, the things she would see would drive her insane? Getting back on track, Ivory tolerates Mac mainly out of respect for her, and also because Mac was able to beat his ass in a one-on-one fight. Their relationship is complicated at best. They're not friends, but they're not enemies either. They just kind of suck it up around each other and occasionally exchange favors. Though if anything, Mac absolutely hates Ivory's cult and their practices and will go to the greatest lengths just to avoid being around them. Ivory tolerates Walter because for some fucking reason, he just can't seem to make Walter hate him entirely. He's done everything from making fun of his divorce with Mark to picking on him for his obsession with gray stuff. Yet Walter just continues to be nice to him no matter what. Eventually, Ivory just kind of gave up and let Walter do whatever he does, though he is still very cold and passive towards him and will still taunt him for his situation with Mark. Ivory tolerates Dr. Retro because when his cult was first starting out, and he's tried using alternative medicine when his followers got sick, it didn't work and a few of them ended up dying from their illness. So he sucked up his pride and decided to ask Dr. Retro for help, which ultimately led to them coming to an agreement that Dr. Retro would help Ivory when his followers were sick in exchange that Ivory would spare her life if he were to go through with his plan for world domination. So I would want Ivory to appear on the two-set camp floor when he's first released, but the floor he would appear on would be called the Forest of Genesis, which is also the forest that his cult resides in. The Forest of Genesis is located in a secluded area of Finland and is closed off to tourists and the public, with a huge sign being at the entrance of the forest stating how anyone who enters the Forest of Genesis and comes back out alive will instantly be arrested and fined. This is because Ivory and his cult aren't too fond of intruders on their land and will kill anyone who trespasses, and the government of Finland is too chicken shit to do anything about it. Anyways, for the appearance of this floor, it would be similar to the puppet combo style, and there would be a few 3D elements sprinkled here and there. As for the gameplay, it would go something like this. The elevator doors would open to reveal the entrance to the Forest of Genesis, with a big sign that says,
"Warning, do not enter beyond this point. Those who enter and make it out intact will be fined 1,000 euros.
Players will also be forced into first-person POV for the duration of this floor, and will be tasked with entering the forest and assigned a random item to use in a ritual that will ultimately summon Ivory to get him into the elevator. The items they have to gather are 3 human hearts, 2 bouquets of purple carnation flowers, 1 red chalk, 6 candles, and 1 flint and steel. The players will be given a time limit of 5 to 6 minutes to gather the items and bring them to an oak tree located in the center of the forest in front of a large fire pit. Sounds pretty simple, right? Well, you're wrong. Throughout the time the players are navigating the Forest of Genesis and gathering their assigned item, Ivory's followers will follow them around and try to kill them. Ivory's followers will also have the cliché weeping angel mechanic to them, where they only move when the player isn't looking at them. How it'll work for this particular scenario, however, is that the followers will move around when the player isn't looking at them as usual, but they will slowly get closer and faster as time progresses that they're not being looked at. The player can tell if a follower is too close to them by the follower's footsteps getting louder and quicker. In order to make the followers leave them alone temporarily, the player will have to look at them in order to make them turn around and run away or dart back into hiding. Once the players have managed to gather all the items and complete the ritual, Ivory will be summoned from the oak tree and will immediately start walking towards the elevator. If the elevator is full by this time, Ivory will kill one of the NPCs in there before taking their spot. Kind of like Dr. Retro will, except he'll use vines sprouted from the floor to kill them instead of laser eyes. Though Ivory won't kill Folly if she's in there because... well, you know. Now for Ivory's in-game model, I actually have a pretty good concept in my head about what I would want him to look like. I made him to be 11'6", 10'6" without his antlers, so his model would probably be taller than both Folly and Walter in retrospect. I would also want the style of his model and the models of his followers who chase the players on his floor to be similar to that of the puppet combo / low polygon style models, but I would also want for his cape to move around when he walks and also for his flower crown to be its own model as well. As for his sound effects, well, basically, yeah, well, I mean, he's a demon. What else were you expecting? So anyways, that's my Regretevator OC. I really hope you guys like him, and I hope that one day he'll be added into the game. I am also open to criticism for how I can improve him, so please feel free to tell me if necessary. Until then, bye for now.